Thank you.
I must take care of the store.
I know. You can see why they have those makeup people, can't you?
Definitely.
See, if Angelina Jolie had this much sweat on, she'd never get into Hello. Thank you. It's at telly, that's always what they did. They always came. Do you remember broadcast news?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That poor guy. What was it, Albert Brooks?
Albert Brooks. When I was working in radio and television, I certainly was working extremely long hours because I was working on live programming that went out late at night, programs about culture and art and the interconnection between politics and art. So I was very often leaving the house from 10, 11 o'clock in the morning and not getting back till after the kids were in bed. So in theory, the idea of being a writer would be that I would always be in the house so the children would have more access to me. My children tell a very, very funny story about how when they were quite young, so probably about 6 and 3, they were both in the bath and I was bathing them, sitting over the edge, you know, with them and their ducks and their toys. And I was in the middle of writing a book. I'd left it in my study, obviously I'd finished for the night, but writers never finish because of course it stays in their head. And I was sitting on the edge of the bath watching them, and I was thinking about the characters and wondering what I was going to do in the next bit of the book. And I suddenly heard, "Mum!" them yelling at me, and I immediately came back and said, "What is it? What is it?" Nobody drowned, everybody was upright, everything was fine. And they turned to me and said, "We've been saying Mum for the last 5 minutes. Where have you been?" And I went, "I'm right here." And they went, "No, where have you been, like in your head?" I then went to university. I got my school scholarship to Cambridge, where the romance of history was sort of systematically beaten out of me by having to become a kind of more academic historian. But I left university understanding and loving history, but having also been taught a discipline which meant that I had learned a little bit how to analyse and think. And that was what I then used in my career. Art and culture always has its feet in history, and history is about politics as much as it's about anything else. I'd written this book about a young woman in Florence, a young woman who couldn't do what she wanted. She was part of the nobility, whose only path was to get married and try and find a way through that, because life was extremely restricted for women during that time. And then I began to think, well, what would I be interested in now? Well, the other great Renaissance city at that moment was Venice. And at a certain point when Florence falls apart because there's a catastrophe within Florentine history, Venice takes over. And then I thought, well, what were the other professions open to women? And of course there is one profession that was open to women, although it's not a respectable one, which was, in a sense, high-class prostitution, which was to become a courtesan, the like of which I suppose is the nearest to a geisha in our understanding of it. So I went to Venice to research this novel, which then turned out to be the novel called In the Company of the Courtesan, which is about, if you like, high-class sex working and sexuality in the Renaissance. And that's something else it's very hard to learn about in history. It's very hard to get in the bedroom door of history. History is a lot about facts, and up until recently, a lot about politics and great men and great battles. But it doesn't tell you a lot about the intimate history of people, who they actually were when the door closed, how they felt about sexuality, how their feelings about religion affected what they thought about sexuality. All of these things, which if we think about it in our own lives, are very subtle and complicated, but incredibly important. Wouldn't it be interesting to know what that was like in the past? These young women who became kind of companions to some of the nobility. And there was absolutely no doubt that although they didn't have a lot of time to make their fortune, if they worked hard and were smart and good at their job, there was money and independence to be had in being a courtesan.